Mike, apparently your announcer, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you're there.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Derrick. Well, Jim is too, but thank you, Derrick, for that. Did you hear the announcer?
I did hear the announcement. Yes.
Well, I mean, did it sound that way to you a little bit?
It sounded that way to me.
Yeah, we might want to get that fixed. See, it sounded
I'm
that way to
taking
Derrick.
care of it right now.
He said, "Yeah, here's your announcer again, Tim Wildman." Anyway, Derrick, let's get the jokes over with. How many? The baseball player?
Oh, if I could hit a curveball when I was growing up, I'd have a completely different life.
Yeah, if you had a dime for every Derek Jeter joke.
Oh my goodness.
You'd be a wealthy man.
If I had a dime for every Derek Jeter joke, I wouldn't be trying out there trying to sell books.
Duly noted.
Wow.
Derek Jeter is with us. That's kind of like growing up being named Elvis Presley or something. You're going to, for people who know baseball, Derek Jeter is a very famous player. Let's talk about your book. What motivated you? What do you do for a living, by the way?
Well, I'm a writer for a living, and so I'm, one of those starving artists, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the ones that wish he wasn't starving.
I understand.
So,
your book is called "Oh America!" Exclamation point! "Oh America" by Derek G. Jeter, Jeter. Where did you get that title? Give us an overview of your subject here.
Well, the title from the book comes from a gentleman by the name of William Stoughton, who was a Puritan way back in the day, most famous for being the Chief Justice who oversaw the Salem witch trials. But what he set out there was, "Oh, America, that God had expected better things from thee and thy children."
Wow.
And I took that quote, not meaning exactly the same thing that Stoughton did, but as I was trying to look at where we were today in the country, I was trying to figure out, are we more free or less free than when the founders established the country? And my conclusion is that for many folks, if you're a woman, if you're an African American, Native American, in many ways you're much more free than you were when the founders established the country. But as a whole, as a collective, I think that we're less free. And that's kind of what the motivation was then for the title of the book, using from that quote, from Stoughton's quote, that God expects better things from us. And I think the thing that I'm trying to get at is that God intended us to be free, but yet we are living now in a situation where I think that we're losing our freedoms.
Well, this is today's Issues, and I'm Jim alongside Tim. We're talking with Derek G. Jeter. And Derek, the book is "Oh America" is what we're talking about today. You think that we're losing our freedom. At this point in our country, when it is almost unpopular to be a Christian, how are faith and freedom intimately connected?
Well, for the founders, and in fact, if you look at liberty as it is, the history of liberty, all the way even back to the time of the Greeks or the Romans, the link between faith and freedom is very tight. The founders, they didn't call it this. This is my title, my term for their idea, but they saw that there was kind of three things that you needed for our form of government to really function well, which they intended a republic for America. I call it the Liberty Triangle, and it goes something like this. For a republic to survive, you need liberty. It requires liberty. It requires maximum freedom. But for freedom to survive, or liberty to survive, the people need to be virtuous. In other words, they need to be able to self-govern themselves. But in order for them to be virtuous, to govern themselves, they need to be people of faith. There has to be religion, some idea that there is a transcendent God who governs over the affairs of mankind. And so for them, the link there is that freedom becomes a very kind of foundational baseline aspect if we want to be free. Because we can only truly be free if we learn how to govern ourselves, but we can only govern ourselves if we have some sense of faith, some sense that we do not belong simply to ourselves, but we belong to God.
Mm. Then we're toast.
Yeah.
This is part of my concern, and it was part of the reason for writing the book.
Now, Derrick,
let me
go ahead.
Clarify.
Please.
I don't know how you clarify we're toast, but I'm going to try to right here. What I meant, I didn't mean to be overly pessimistic or overly sarcastic. What I meant was, Derrick, what you've described is absolutely true. John Adams spoke to it, a lot of the founders. George Washington, go read his farewell address.
Absolutely.
George Washington.
In fact, I'm sorry, Jim, but in fact, I include Washington's farewell address in the book.
How do you get a copy of your book, by the way? It's called Oh, America. How do you get a copy of it?
You can get a copy of it if you want to. You can just go right to my website, which is DerrickJeter.com, Derrick. It's spelled like an oil, Derrick. Jeter, Jeter.com. And I also sell it on Amazon.
Like an oil Derrick.
I'm guessing it has something to do with Texas.
Has something to do with Texas, yeah.
He lives in Texas. He lives in the Dallas area.
I don't know what an old Derrick is, though.
Really?
I know what a Dairy Queen is, and a Dairy Cow, but I don't know what a Dairy. Anyway,
we'll
that doesn't matter.
The show, Tim.
Hey, mock me. That's all right. I don't know everything, I admit. DerrickJeter.com, DerrickJeter. Dot. Is that what you said? Dot what?
.com.
Okay.
If I still have a job after the show today, I'll
Jim,
explain
hey,
the old Derrick to you.
You're free to speak.
Derrick, you've written more than 25 books, and a lot of them do focus on our liberty and things of that nature, and especially some of the post 9/11 things that we walked through. One of the things that you bring out in your book is, and Tim has mentioned this several times on the show as well, we have become a country that is completely dependent upon the government for our welfare. And that really is a severe inhibition in the right word, drain on our freedom, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. If for no other reason that the bigger the state, it's kind of a fundamental principle, the bigger the state, the smaller the citizen. And I think what happens is that the state then, through welfare programs, a lot of progressive programs, what it does is it crowds out smaller communities. It crowds out your local state, Mississippi, Texas, Arkansas, wherever. It tends to crowd out the actual state.
You mean the federal government?
The federal government does, yes, because that's where we now have started to really look to all of the answers to all the problems that we seem to have today. Is we tend to look to Washington, D.C.
Right.
And the founders didn't intend for Washington, D.C. to govern every aspect of our lives. That's why we have a 10th Amendment and why they made the constitutional enumerated and limited. Because what they wanted is that they wanted either the local states and the things that the local states then shouldn't handle, it should be handled in the various municipalities, your villages, your cities, your towns. And then even from there, it should trickle down to private associations, to churches, to families, to neighborhoods. And I think what we've got today is that most of us tend to look to Washington, and we don't end up doing really what I think the Scripture teaches us to do, which is to care for each other.
The closer let me interrupt you there just a minute,
sure.
Derrick. Tim Wildman here with Jim Stanley. Our guest is Derrick G. Jeter, Jeter. His book is called Oh, America. we're talking about some of the basic principles that that define America historically, and they're being eroded, unfortunately. And there's a chance, although the chance is getting slimmer, that we can restore our republic, but it's not looking good right now. But I want to ask you about that for just a minute. Here's the. I don't know if somebody planned this to happen the way it has happened, what I'm about to describe, or it's just human nature, and so it by osmosis happened. But what has happened is the United States federal government, based in Washington, D.C., which our founding fathers intended to be small and lean and not authoritative, has so expanded over the last century that it affects all of our lives almost every day, and we have become addicted to it.
Right.
Let me tell you something. Look at your state, and I'll guarantee you, every state in the union is getting money sent to them from Washington, D.C. for various and sundry programs. The states are addicted to that money. So the states, while there is a trend growing to elect more conservative governors and more conservative legislators in states even like Michigan, for instance, still
it's hard to get away from that.
Even the states are dependent on the federal government sending them money. Now, I quite frankly have never understood if if you send money to Washington and Washington runs it through their bureaucratic ringer,
right,
and then sends you back a quarter on your dollar, you're supposed to be thankful for that. You're supposed to say, well, we got a grant from the federal government. Well, that's our taxes that went to Washington. So, I mean, the whole thing is kind of, it's messed up, and I don't know how we're going to fix it, but I do think a lot of Americans, thanks to education like you provide here, Derrick, are waking up to what has happened. But the closer the government is to you, the more responsive it is to you, and the more responsible it is to you, and the more accountable it is. Derrick, isn't that true?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, just for example, my state senator, who represents me in Austin, not only do I know personally, I mean, he's also my attorney, and the point being is that I have more influence over him as a legislator than I do over my congressman or my two senators in Washington, D.C. If for no other reason is that, well, I know where my state senator actually lives. I know where he goes to church.
Right.
The idea is that not to somehow coerce him or anything.
Right.
But there's an opportunity to actually sit down and to talk about policy.
Well, he has put a face to his constituents.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, what happens, I think, often from the legislative side of things is that the good folks from Mississippi or Texas or Alaska or Hawaii, whatever, they go to Washington. That's where they spend almost all of their time. They live there. Except for when they come back to the state for either re-election purposes or, they're on break for the summer. But they basically live there, and they become, in many ways, untouchable from the electorate.
Well, they become Washingtonians. They get in, and I don't know if you've ever spent time in Washington. I have, and there is kind of it's a different feeling. There is a bit of a bubble that takes place there. In Washington. But, I think on the other side of things, for us as the citizens, I think that we kind of forget that the Constitution begins with we the people in order to form a more perfect union. That the government, the way at least our government is supposed to function, is that we have the power. It is we the people. But I think that we forget that, and we assume that they have all the power. Yeah.
I think we forget that, wait a minute, these are the tax dollars. Those dollars are not Washington's dollars.